What if the path to perfect lifelike audio demanded a design so inefficient that most of its power was simply lost as heat? It sounds almost irrational, doesn't it? In a world obsessed with efficiency in our cars, in our homes, our computers, every watt, every drop of fuel is optimized. We celebrate technology that gives us more for less, more speed, less waste, more power, less draw. But in high fidelity audio, something fascinating happens. The rules bend. The obsession with efficiency takes a backseat to something far less logical: emotion. There is a small but passionate corner of this world that willingly trades electrical efficiency for musical glory. It's a philosophy that says, let it run hot, let it waste power, if it means the music flows with absolute purity. One amplifier design in particular takes this belief to its extreme. It chases the dream of zero distortion sound, a direct, unfiltered connection to the source, a sonic window so transparent it feels like you are hearing straight into the recording itself. But it comes at a steep cost, not just in dollars, but in watts of wasted energy, in massive metal heat sinks, and in rooms that grow warmer just because you turned the amplifier on. Today, we're venturing into the heart of the amplifier, the driving engine of every hi fi system, to explore three fundamental philosophies that define how music is powered: Class A, Class B, and Class AB. These are the traditional heavyweights, the blueprints that built decades of audio history. And yes, there is a hyper efficient challenger called Class D, a design that flips everything we're about to discuss. We'll touch on it briefly later, but for now, our focus is on the classics, the designs that defined what high fidelity really means. This is the story of logic versus love, of efficiency versus emotion, a story where the rational engineer's pursuit of perfection collides with the romantic audiophile's refusal to compromise. And by the end, we'll see which amplifier class truly gets closest to that elusive goal of perfect sound and whether the price of that perfection is worth paying. But before we can crown a winner, we need to strip this down to fundamentals. What is an amplifier actually doing? At its core, an amplifier doesn't create music, it magnifies it. It takes the delicate signal from your source or preamplifier and transforms it into a powerful electrical force capable of moving drivers in your loudspeakers, pushing and pulling air to recreate sound in the room. And the perfection of that process, the accuracy with which it scales the original signal, is what separates a good amplifier from a truly great one. So, to understand what makes Class A, B, and AB amplifiers sound the way we do, we need to peek inside the circuit and meet the real hero or villain behind it all, the transistor. And just to be clear, we're talking about solid state amplifiers here, circuits built around transistors rather than vacuum tubes. Tube amps follow the same core principle of controlling current with a signal, but they use vacuum tubes instead of semiconductors. And that's a whole other story for another day. The best way to think of a transistor is an incredibly sensitive and fast acting valve or faucet controlling the flow of a massive amount of electrical current from your wall outlet. The tiny audio signal from your music doesn't power the speaker directly. Instead, It acts as the hand that turns the handle on this valve. A small turn, a quiet passage in the music, lets a little current flow to the speaker. A big turn, a loud crescendo, opens the valve wide, letting a torrent of current flow through. The music signal is just the blueprint. The power from the wall is the raw material. The transistor is the craftsman, meticulously shaping that raw power to follow the blueprint. The perfection of the sound you hear depends entirely on how well that craftsman, the transistor, does its job. How accurately does it open and close the valve? How consistently does it respond to the tiny instructions from the source? The answers to those questions are what define the different classes of amplifiers. And that's where we'll start with the pursuit, the idealist, the most uncompromising design of them all, Class A. Imagine you're behind the wheel of a high performance race car, and the goal is instantaneous, perfect throttle response. Not just fast, but flawless delivery. Any touch of that pedal has to translate into an immediate and perfectly proportional response from the engine. How do you do it? Well, one way is to keep the engine running at very high idle at all times, poised and ready. There'd be no lag, no hesitation. The car would be a beast, chugging fuel even when standing still and radiating immense heat. But its responsiveness would be second to none. It would peel. This is the philosophy of a Class A amplifier. In a Class A design, the output transistors, our microscopic valves, are biased to conduct electricity continuously. They're not fully saturated or fully on, but they're held in their most linear, most accurate operating region at all times. The amplifier draws a large amount of current from the power supply, whether there's music playing or not. This steady state current is called quiescent current. And in Class A, it's set so high that the transistor is always operating in the center of its most linear range. Going back to our valve analogy, the valve isn't just cracked open, it's already flowing strongly with a steady stream of current running through it from the moment you turn the amp on. The incoming audio signal simply modulates this existing flow, causing it to increase or decrease slightly to create the waveform. So why go to such an extreme? The answer is one word: linearity. Transistors aren't perfectly linear. They behave differently right when they turn on and right before they saturate. But in the middle of their range, they are remarkably consistent. Their response is almost perfectly linear, meaning the output is almost perfect, scaled up version of the input. By biasing the transistors so they're always conducting in the sweet spot, the Class A design completely avoids those problematic nonlinear regions. The transistor never has to wake up or switch on and off. It's always ready, always active, always precise. This means that the entire 360 degrees of an audio waveform, the full rise and fall of a musical note, the same device handles it smoothly and continuously. As a result, Class A completely avoids a specific type of distortion we'll talk about later, known as crossover distortion. This is the origin of the almost mythical reputation of Class A sound. Audiophiles and engineers alike describe it as pure, seamless, liquid, and natural because there is no switching happening in the output stage. The harmonic structure of the music is preserved with breathtaking fidelity. The timbre of an instrument, the subtle decay of a cymbal into the recording venue, the texture of a singer's breath, all those fragile details that define realism are rendered with stunning clarity. The sound is often called warm or musical not because it adds coloration, but because it doesn't. The absence of harsh, unnatural distortion allows the natural warmth of the recording itself to shine through. But this quest for purity comes at a staggering cost: heat. Because the transistors are always conducting current, a Class A amplifier is wildly inefficient. Think back to that idling race car, burning fuel just sitting in the pit lane. It's the same principle. A Class A amp draws nearly constant current from the supply, regardless of whether the music is playing or not. Most of this power isn't converted to sound, it's simply turned into heat. In a single ended Class A design, the theoretical maximum efficiency is only about 25%. And even in push pull Class A configurations, the best you can theoretically achieve is around 50%. In real life, it's usually less. For every 100 watts of power the amp pulls from your wall, you might get only 25 watts or even less delivered to your speakers. The other 75 watts, gone as heat. This is why Class A amps are famously massive and heavy. They need enormous power supplies to feed their constant hunger for current and gigantic, sharp finned heat sinks to dissipate all that heat. A powerful Class A amplifier can legitimately warm up your entire listening room. Building a high power Class A amplifier is therefore an engineering challenge. A 100 watt per channel Class A amp would be enormous, heavy, and expensive, and it would devour electricity. As a result, most true Class A designs are lower powered, typically between 10 and 50 watts per channel. So, Class A presents a fascinating trade off. It offers a glimpse of amplification perfection, a sound of supreme linearity and purity, but it achieves this ideal through a brute force approach that is wasteful, heavy, and hot. For the dedicated listener chasing that last ounce of sonic truth, the heat, the size, and the electric bill might be a small price to pay, but for the rest of the world, this was a problem begging for a solution, one that would prioritize efficiency above all else. And that brings us to the pragmatist Class B. So, if Class A is the idealistic artist obsessed with purity no matter the cost, then Class B is the ruthlessly practical engineer determined to solve its predecessor's glaring inefficiencies. The engineer looks at Class A, hot, heavy, and power hungry, and spots the root cause: the transistors are always on. The obvious fix: turn them off when not needed. This is the fundamental principle of Class B. Instead of one set of transistors handling the entire waveform, a Class B amplifier uses a push-pull configuration. Two complementary transistors share workload. One handles the positive half of the waveform, while the other handles the negative half. When the music signal goes from positive, the push transistor turns on, while the pull transistor turns off. When the signal crosses zero and goes negative, the opposite happens. The pull transistor takes over and the push device rests. They alternate in perfect rhythm. The result? Tremendous improvement in efficiency. Each transistor is off for half the waveform, and when there is no input signal, both remain off, drawing minimal current. The theoretical maximum efficiency of an ideal Class B push-pull amplifier reproducing a sine wave is 78.5%, more than double that of Class A. This brings major real-world benefits: cooler operation, smaller heat sinks, more compact designs, and much more affordable production. It made high power amplification possible at reasonable cost. From an engineering perspective, it's a brilliantly efficient system. But of course, there's a catch. This is where crossover distortion enters the picture. The name gives it away. The distortion occurs right at the crossover point, that delicate instant when the signal passes through 0 volts from positive to the negative half, and the job switches between the push and the pull transistors. Here's the issue: it takes a small threshold voltage to turn a transistor on, about zero point 0.7 volts for a silicon BJT, a bipolar junction transistor, though it can be higher for MOSFETs, sometimes around 2 volts. Around that zero crossing region, both transistors are effectively off for a brief moment. During that tiny window, the amplifier produces no output at all. The musical waveform flattens slightly, producing a harsh, jagged discontinuity every time the signal crosses 0. That's crossover distortion. It may seem minuscule, but its sonic impact can be dramatic, especially at lower volumes, where most of the signal resides near 0. This distortion becomes proportionally large and audibly intrusive. It sounds harsh, grainy, particularly the treble. Cymbals turn into sizzle, violins acquire an edge, and vocals can sound strained or artificial. The result feels fatiguing and unmusical. So while Class B solved the efficiency problem brilliantly, it created a new one just as serious. It failed at the very essence of high fidelity sound. Now we have two extremes: Class A, the pure but wasteful artist, and Class B, the efficient but flawed pragmatist. Now the stage was set for a compromise, a hero that could bridge both worlds. We're about to meet and talk about the design that powers most of the amplifiers you've ever heard, from budget to high end. It's the ingenious middle ground that made true high fidelity possible in the real world. If you're enjoying this deep dive into amplifier design and want to see more episodes like this, please take a second to subscribe and hit that notification bell. It really helps support in depth content like this. And while you're here, check out the video card on the screen. It's a curated series that helps demystify common hi fi concepts that often sound more complicated than they really are. From DAC filters and impedance matching to speaker sensitivity and ground loops, these easy to follow videos will expand your understanding of what's really happening inside your system, one concept at a time. Now, let's meet the hero of our story. The brilliance of the Class AB amplifier isn't a radical reinvention, but an elegant evolution of Class B. Engineers realized that the core issue, crossover distortion, happened because both transistors were completely off during that brief handoff. The fix: make sure that neither transistor ever fully turns off. They did this by applying a small bias current to each output device. That bias kept both push and pull transistors slightly on at all times, just enough to overcome their voltage threshold to wake up. Think of it like adjusting a car's idle speed, not the roaring idle of a race car like Class A, but high enough to ensure it never stalls. This bias changes the operating conduction angle. In Class A, a transistor conducts for the full 360 degrees of the waveform. In Class B, it's a strict 180 degrees. In Class AB, it's a little more than 180 degrees, perhaps 190, 200 or so. That small overlap is everything. Now, as the waveform crosses 0, one transistor is still conducting while the other takes over. They overlap briefly, sharing the load. That smooth overlap completely removes the dead zone that caused the kink in Class B. Crossover distortion vanishes, or in a well-engineered design, it's reduced to levels far below audibility. Here's the beauty of it. At very low signal levels, where the entire waveform fits within that bias overlap, Both transistors conduct throughout the entire cycle, approximating class A behavior. You get the same sweetness and smoothness for the quietest musical details. This is what audiophiles mean when they talk about the first watt. Those delicate first few watts determine the amp's tonal character and musicality. At low levels, class AB behaves like class A. As the signal grows and demands more power, it smoothly transitions into class B operation, efficient, cool, and powerful. This is why Class AB became the dominant amplifier design in the world of hi fi. It offers the purity of Class A where it matters most and the practicality of Class B when the music swells. Efficiency typically falls in the 35 to 60% range, far better than Class A, yet still capable of beautiful sound. It's a golden balance, realistic to own, affordable to build, and capable of world class fidelity. Designers can tune where their amp sits on the Class AB continuum. Low bias Class AB amps run cooler but lean more towards the efficiency side. High bias Class AB amplifiers, those that operate in Class A for the first 5, 10, or even 20 watts, run hotter and heavier but offer more of that liquid Class A flavor. That's why you'll sometimes see manufacturers proudly advertise operates in Class A up to 5 to 10 watts. Is their way of saying you're getting a taste of both worlds. So, where do we stand? Class A, the idealist, pursues absolute purity. It delivers a smooth, detailed, and natural sound that's theoretically free from switching distortion, but it's inefficient, hot, and costly. Class B, the pragmatist, solved the power problem but introduced crossover distortion that made it unsuitable for critical listening. Class AB became the intelligent synthesis, a perfect middle ground balancing fidelity and efficiency. On paper, Class AB wins hands down. For most listeners and most systems, it's the sweet spot. Clean, dynamic, and capable of driving almost any speaker beautifully. But hi fi is never just all about specs, it's also about emotion, the feeling in the room, and that's where the debate never ends. Class A devotees argue that even the finest AB designs still transition between modes while pure Class A stays constant. They believe that this constancy, the same device handling the full waveform at all times, gives it a coherence and effortlessness that no switching topology can match. Engineers, on the other hand, counter that a well balanced Class AB amplifier with precisely managed bias and feedback can measure so cleanly that any difference from Class A is inaudible. Objectively speaking, distortion can be pushed below the threshold of human hearing. Some suggest that the magic of Class A might simply come from a slightly different distortion spectrum, perhaps richer in even order harmonics, or even the psychological expectation that big, hot, heavy amplifiers must sound better. And that tension between science and perception, between data and delight, is what keeps this hobby so endlessly fascinating. In our search for the perfect amplifier class, we've discovered there isn't a single right answer. Instead, there is a spectrum, a balance between theoretical purity and real world practicality. Class A stands as the symbol of perfection through excess, flawless linearity achieved through wasteful beauty. Class AB represents the masterful compromise, just enough bias to give music that first watt sweetness and just enough efficiency to keep the room from melting. And it's worth mentioning that from Class AB came a few clever offshoots, Class G and Class H amplifiers. Both are essentially refinements of the AB principle, created to push efficiency even further without losing fidelity. So, which one truly unlocks perfect sound? The answer depends entirely on you. What you value most, purity or pragmatism, warmth or power, obsession or balance. And just when you think the story ends here, a new chapter begins, because beyond these traditional designs lies Class D, where transistors switch at breathtaking speeds, rewriting the rules of efficiency and fidelity. But that's a story for another day. If you've ever wondered how much amplifier power you really need, or whether you're reading your amp's specs the right way, check out the videos appearing on your screen right now. They'll give you the clarity to match the perfect amp to your system and maybe save you from chasing watts you'll never use. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.